it's interesting to think about this, the picture of trauma healing and trauma resolution across generations rather than just in an individual. And it's very, very obvious when you look at stories like that, where you've got a whole group of people who are willing to risk everything for what was not working for them somewhere.
We're here today with Teal Swan, who is an incredible luminary, spiritual teacher, medicine woman, highly intuitive, gifted teacher. And there is an important message that she shares, an intuitive and an important energetic message for all of us. So if you would like to learn how to truly do healing at the deepest level for yourself, and it's not what you think, and for your ancestor line behind and past you and going forward, this episode is a must watch. Please share this with anybody that it could help. And if you found me on YouTube, thank you for liking and subscribing to my channel. And please do leave comments. I love to hear what you're thinking, your feedback, your insights, and I respond to everyone. So from my heart to yours, I really know that this conversation is going to bring you way closer to your intuitive guidance, your U.S. you, and your soul's calling and purpose. Teal Swan is joining us today, and I have been looking forward to this conversation. You are like, honestly, when I think of you as someone with like 550 years of wisdom. Like you are very youthful, and yet you're ancient in your wisdom. And so that is a compliment. I'm so happy you're here, Teal. It's really fun to have you back on the USU podcast.
I'm very glad to be back. Yep.
I'm going to like come back down to earth because I'm so excited. For those that don't know or didn't see the first episode, we did almost 6 years ago when I started. I know. I was like, I was recording in my kitchen. I don't know if I've come a long way, but it's shifted since then. Thank goodness. And yeah, we met, I went to your completion process training in Michigan. And I remember you saying, I chose this location because I want to raise the vibration. And I was like, damn, this woman, all right, we're in the same, I don't know if we're exactly in the same astral place, but we're somewhere similar because that to me was like, that is awesome. That is badass. I was so excited to think about what we were doing, raising the vibration. And that was just that was such a magical week experience with you. I still, to this day, like I have friends from it. I've never forgotten it. And maybe we start a little bit with the completion process. That's, my experience with you was really at another level. And for those that don't know you, I'd be surprised, but just in case, or they don't know the completion process, I'm going to let you just share what that is, how it came about, what you've been doing with it since, and we'll start there.
Okay, the completion process, to summarize, is essentially a process that helps people to heal the unresolved traumas that have happened in their life. When most people hear that, they think about traumas in terms of the big T, things like high-speed car accidents and serious sex abuse and trafficking and natural disasters. But it's very important that people understand that trauma is really just about distress that has not been resolved. So if we look at trauma through the lens of distress without resolve, there's not a single adult who is walking around the planet today that has not experienced that and therefore does not have these unresolved traumas present within them. We also take seriously for granted how much damage these, what we would label as a smaller trauma, does. I'll just give you one example. So let's say that you're dealing with an adult who has this chronic pattern around being cheated on. Now, a lot of times when you work with that person to resolve the trauma that is at the root of those adult reflective experiences of trauma, you find a childhood experience with a sibling. Usually it's around the time that a new sibling was introduced to the family, and there's a competitive dynamic for the love of the parent. And what most people don't know is that the love of the parent is experienced in the exact same way, actually, physiologically in the body, as our connection to a primary partner. And so when parents fail to, let's say, do the right thing when they're introducing a new baby into the family, it creates this extraordinary, jealousy, envy dynamic, which continues to repeat in our adult life as picking partners who put us in these competitive dynamics and ending up in those dynamics. So what I want people to understand is that these negative experiences that they're having in their adult life, whether it's a physical ailment or a mental issue that they're facing, or, a chronic pattern of pain, it has its roots in these unresolved experiences. So what the completion process does is it capitalizes on triggers, which is the opposite way that most people look at triggers. Most people in the mental health field, in the spiritual field, the whole goal when people are having these triggers is to get rid of the trigger. But what a trigger is doing is acting as an emotional flashback, actually calling your consciousness back to that unresolved moment because it needs resolution. So we have this attitude when we're working with the completion process of going with that innate self-healing behavior, actually, that the being has, and we get on board with it so as to go revisit what's unresolved, so as to bring resolution to it. Now, there's several steps to it, and it's like a whole method. But that method is basically to make it so that your life is not so ruled by all of the trauma you experienced and the adaptations which you developed as a result of those traumas. And I'm telling you, those adaptations we make, they ruin your life. They make it so you cannot live an authentic life experience. So,
yeah. It's interesting. You bring up right away the whole trauma with a lowercase t. Like it could be bigger, it could be uppercase T, but this was something that really hit me, and that I think anyone listening, as you said, any of us walking around as human beings, because we're soul, yes, and we're human. So we're gonna have these lowercase t traumas. And I remember in the process of getting trained, first of all, the incredible practice that we had. And I remember like one of mine, it seemed pretty small, but it had a huge, like I talk about people pleasing, and it's just something I'm really slowly letting go of. And I saw where one of the places it originated, right? Someone in 7th grade yelled at me. Like, it was not a fun experience. Girls can be mean. And I freaked out. My nervous system shut down. I'm just sharing because I was so amazed at this. Like, I didn't realize how that experience and how like you said, calling back that part of me and going into the trigger, which frankly, and I've talked about this here, I'm sure you've seen this with addiction. I used food and sugar to just like stop any of these emotions. I felt so like, I don't want to feel that. It was so awful. And so I'm saying that because I know many who tune in have, struggle with addictive behaviors, which can be really like we want to stop that feeling. And the thing I was really amazed with is, you go into the trigger, you go into it. Can we say a little more about that? Because I know we're going to talk about ancestral healing, which goes way deeper. But I think for people that are listening with the lowercase t trauma to understand that is still running your life. It can be if you have not dealt with it.
Well, I think one of the easiest ways for people to really sort this out is to do what I call a trauma graph. So for a trauma graph, what you do is you pick something that you experienced that is an unresolved trauma. Now, that's just basically a situation that you got into that's still painful and it kind of still haunts you a little bit to this day. It doesn't matter how big or small. So after you've done that, you write what that experience caused you to decide about life, or what beliefs it caused you to come up with. And then after that, how that changed your behaviors and your choices and your actions. So I've got an example. Let's say that in your childhood experience, dad left. Let's just make it kind of like something that's easy to understand. Dad leaves. What do I make that mean? I make it mean that I'm not good enough for somebody to stay with me. Of course, we know later in life that's going to translate to I'm not good enough for a man to stay with me, right? So I'm not good enough for my dad to stay with me. I need to perform and excel in order to earn love. Okay, now let's say, how did that dictate the way that I behaved? I became completely oriented towards achievements. And I made my worth all about achievements. And if I lost my mind, because losing suddenly meant losing people, not just losing a game or something like that. And I chose men who go away from me. So it's almost like the pattern that I may have adopted, let's say that I'm this person, is that when a man's available, it doesn't register to me as love or even particularly gripping. What I'm after is a guy who pulls away so that I can get into this chase dynamic, trying to get my dad's love vicariously through getting a man who is pulling away to change his mind and come back towards me. Now, that is very simplified, because if I pick something like that, like dad left when I was 2 or something, the amount of things you could have decided about that, the amount of beliefs that you could come up with, and the subsequent changes that happened in your life in accordance with that, it is mind-blowing. And it's not until we sit down with these, what we're calling lower T traumas, and really look at that flow chart, that we realize, oh my gosh, like, I'm sorry, it's like, I didn't get the gum at the store and the entire trajectory of my life has changed. You know?
It's pretty powerful. Yeah, it's I just have to say, and I think for anyone who's interested, I know on your website, I think you still have listed people that are trained in it. It's funny, when I did it, Teal, I was like, I want the healing for myself, and I use it in a way with what I do. I found it so healing and so powerful, and I remember it's a pretty intensive process, and no, it is. And just going into something I've thought a lot about. I think this was almost 10 years ago, which is nuts. But the whole idea of, revealing those feelings to heal, that we've got to be in them. And I know for many of us, for me, I was like, oh, heck no, I don't want to feel any of that. And then it's like, oh, actually the medicine is in that. And that's what what I really love about this. I mean, the process is powerful. It is not for the faint of heart, but it's life-changing. It's healing. It really is.
I kind of love that, because when people hear about, the completion process, or any of these words we may use in the self-development field, it kind of paints this picture of like, oh, we're going to be doing an abstract visualization. No. This is really, it's like soul surgery, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's a good. Well, we're going to come back to the conversation around intuition. It actually is going to, I want to ask you about it, but I will say something too, that I had a new relationship with my intuition after this experience, the ability to be with somebody and see and feel and connect to these parts of them that had these traumas, and to help with the healing. It was one of the most beautiful and visceral experiences. I actually kind of felt like, I've never been a midwife or a doula, but it almost felt like I was helping. And I remember you came over, it was a 4-hour experience, and you were like, you're in it, you're there, you're doing it. I'm like, oh, we're doing something, because I feel like I'm delivering herself out of it. It was really, I just, anyhow, the time with you is just magical. And maybe for those, if you can share for a minute, as much as you'd like, about your coming to the realization about this process and how you've used it with many, many people. Like, how did you, I know you have incredible ability to connect with human beings at all levels. How did you come to this process? And then we'll talk about ancestral healing, because I think that is fascinating as well.
The way that I came to completion process is actually in increments. The best way to kind of think about it is like, there's all these different puzzle pieces, and I didn't have the full picture of that puzzle for a lot of years, because I was just getting each piece kind of individually, not connected to each other. The beginning of this whole process actually began back when I was a child, because as an extrasensory, being somebody who used to spontaneously go out of body, I didn't used to have control over it like I do now. I would go out of body and be able to see like all these very weird things that at first I didn't understand. Like, one of those things was that I was looking at people who had holes in their auric field. And one day, just for fun, I was like, I wonder what happens if I take my consciousness and go through the holes in this person's auric field. And instead of ending up like on the other side of them, I ended up literally in a memory of theirs. And I started to realize that these spaces of absence within the energy field represent aspects of a person's consciousness that are stuck in the past and are not present with them. And so I started actually just very intuitively going back and trying to create some positive things in those memories for the person. Now, I didn't know any of this because I was just doing this intuitively, and was not, unfortunately, born into a culture that would have been able to take me and, make me the oracle or the sort of sage woman in their tribe and teach me what was happening. It was just a lot of experimentation. But what I was actually doing was soul retrieval, which is something that shamans do. A lot of them do that when you're on medicine journeys and things like that. So I was performing the soul retrieval, and it didn't really occur to me that this is something that a person could do for themselves. So that's like an individual part of it. The other part of it is I was very disturbed as a child when I would walk into houses and there would be these imprints, like aspects of consciousness that are stuck in the house. Things like, let's say I remember very vividly walking into a room where had been a lot of sex abuse that had happened there. And the consciousness of the little girl who had been in that room was in the carpet fibers, and it actually projected itself into like a snow globe that was there. So I'm sitting here just staring at all these like fragmented aspects of this little girl's consciousness. And I was like, my gosh, we can literally get stuck in time. So that's like one of those puzzle pieces that's not connected to anything else. Next puzzle piece. I was severely abused in my childhood, like very, very severely. And in my teen years, I was put down in this hole that my abuser used to put me down in. He used to call it the mind space. And I would never know if when he would come back, I would get murdered or whether I'd get taken out or what mood he would be in. It was like this very terrifying experience. So I was having a panic attack down there in the mind space one day when I was about probably like 17 or so. And it occurred to me like I'm already suicidal. So I can feel the fact that I'm kind of trying to move away from the way I feel. It's what you described actually earlier when you said, I don't want to feel that. So when we have that recognition, I don't want to feel that, then you can actually feel that you yourself are pulling away from another aspect of you, the way you feel. So I have this thought when I was down there in the mind space, which is, why, if I am already suicidal, am I running away from a specific feeling? Why not just go into it? Hopefully my heart will stop and it will kill me. So I decided to take my consciousness in towards it, right? And the exact opposite thing happens from what I had expected. Instead of the panic attack getting worse, it calms down. And it was when, this is about 17 or so, is when I started to play with this concept that actually the solution for emotions is to go towards them, not away from them. And in fact, if you resist them by going away, it intensifies them. So that's a separate piece. The next piece is that obviously, I worked mostly as a medical intuitive in the very beginning of my career, like so many of us do when we're seeing things like this. And what's interesting from the perspective of a medical intuitive is that the body never does anything against itself. And when I say that, I mean also things like autoimmune disorders, things where we can point to and be like, the body does go against itself. No, it actually doesn't. When it's attacking itself like that, there's a very real purpose, and that purpose is usually for self-preservation. So if we take this attitude that there's always a good reason why the body's doing what it's doing, and it's always doing what it's doing because it thinks it's for the person, then what is the purpose of a trigger in the first place? What is the purpose of a flashback? Well, obviously, it's trying to get your attention. It's like a skipping CD being like, I can't get past this. And so it starts to take on this, I guess, flavor of like, that we have kind of an audacity when the being is crying out like that for help, to be like, and now let's breathe so that the trigger goes down. And now let's focus on something better so that the trauma goes down or trigger. And so I basically was like, wait, hold the phone. We are directly going against the call of the being and the call of the body. That's like having a broken leg and injecting Novocaine into your leg. That's not going to solve anything. Okay, so that's a standalone piece. The other standalone piece is like, I went to trauma therapy. Obviously, getting away from what I went through, I was a mess of a person. So I go into ritual trauma therapy, and it was in that therapy that I was even introduced to the concept of the inner child. But it's like very rudimentary. It's like, oh, you've still got the child within you, the essence of the inner self. And it wasn't like this complex picture of fragmentation of self. It was just, you've got an inner child. And as simplistic as that sounds, it was quite revolutionary for me, especially because it got me over a serious cutting issue that I was having at the time, because of this concept that if I'm taking a knife to my arm, I'm actually cutting the child, not just me, right? So all these pieces started to come together when my clients, when they were starting to come to me in my very early 20s, it was like everything that they were dealing with linked back to some kind of an unresolved issue. And it's at this point that all these pieces start to come together, and I start doing this very intuitive process of actually leading a person to do a kind of form of self-retrieval soul retrieval, on themselves. And then I ended up doing this for a man who is a businessman, and he came out of it like with such a huge experience on the other end of it. He's like, you have to make this a process. And I didn't even think that was a thing. I'm thinking like, it's going to have to be me. How can I reach all the people in the world? But he really actually did challenge me. He's like, I need you to sit down and see whether this is something that you could like actually teach people to do. And it was just genius beyond measure. Why? Because my frustration, like I said, is that I can't be in the room with everyone in this world. And it can't be that, in order to heal your past traumas, you have to find a shaman who can perform soul retrieval. It's not a thing, okay? Especially not for people. The vast majority of people who have a huge bulk of trauma are not in the position to be able to do that. So I ended up sitting down and actually trying to create this flow chart of how somebody could do that process on themselves. And the rest is history. It became a book, and now it's an e-course. And
amazing. And if I'm correct, you brought this work to jails, to prison, to, I remember I was getting chills, the soul retrieval, and what you said, I just want to reiterate the power, because I'm someone who was like, no, I don't want to feel that. Like, I don't want to. And, for those, it's a fine line of the toxic positivity. I happen to, all the assessments, I tend to have that, like, I'm just looking for what's the positive here. It's kind of how I'm wired. However, when it comes to emotions and to traumas, especially like the lowercase t ones too, that methodology, it does not work. And for many of us, and especially in a feel-good culture, it's like the last thing many of us want to do. And so I got to be honest, I've had to like train myself to feel it. And for me, Teal, I have like created a new thing when I am like angry or cry or really get in it. I'm like, Julie, that's like doing everything on your to-do list today. Like you're a bad, like I just go into like being I praise the shit out of myself. I've had to teach myself. I'm still, my instinct is like, give me a chocolate bar, like give me some ice, give me something. And it's been taking time, but this has really worked. And I've actually used the completion process on myself quite a bit. So you're with me in many, I know many watching now, just are grateful for you and your work. And we'll come back because I want to ask about being the extrasensory, like how you've grounded yourself and used that now. I just think it's so cool. Can we talk for a moment about ancestral healing? Because there's been, I think, a lot in the air around it, but to really get like, what is it? And then since I'm going to go on a limb, I think you can actually see what's happening intuitively. Like maybe you can explain it from perspectives that we may not have heard of before, like what actually is possible with ancestral healing and how we do that. Just share what you want. Small topic.
Yeah. So when it comes to this ancestral healing stuff, what we're really looking at is two things. The first is to find these patterns that are no longer benefiting our family line and that are active within us, right? These are patterns which we have inherited, adopted, taken on. And also on the other side of that, finding these beneficial patterns that are running within a family line and owning them and embodying them. So it's these two major veins that we're focused at with ancestral healing. In truth, if you want me to be honest with you, every person is actually doing ancestral healing. They just don't know it. I'll give you an example. Let's say that in your childhood, you were part of a family line that's very aloof. So everybody's aloof with each other. There's not a lot of intimacy. So that pattern could be running from great-great-great-great-grandparent all the way down to the way that you yourself was parented in an aloof way. And now all of a sudden you're a person in your adult life in relationships that has no idea how to create genuine intimacy, and it's wreaking havoc on your life. It sucks for you, right? Everybody leaves you and is like, oh my gosh, you're just like never there. And you're kind of confused, right? So these types of patterns we would notice even if we didn't know anything about our parent, grandparent, great-grandparent, anything. So in truth, whenever we're doing healing work, which I'm sorry, if you're listening to this right now, you're doing healing work, we are actually working on ancestral patterns. Most of us just don't know it yet. But the knowing of it really does change a lot for a person. And it's very important for us right now, especially where we are as a human race, to see ourselves within this greater context, because we've lost it. And so much of what's causing this world to go haywire in terms of human society is that we don't have a good, strong handle on the ancestral traumas, which have been running through cultures and through countries. And, so it's very, very, very critical to understand that before you came into this life, you did not just choose to come into this physical body with your physical soul like it's a one-off experience. One of the things that you chose as a part of coming into this is to come in as the progression of a family line. So there's a huge degree of adoption of a consciousness in the very incarnation story that a person has. When we decide to come into that, it's mutually beneficial. We decide to do that because coming into that deck of cards, which I'd like to call it a deck of cards because you've got some that are like, wow, yeah, and some that are like, eh. So we decided that deck of cards was going to benefit our personal expansion in this life experience and serve the purpose that we would like to use this life for. At the same time as us doing so would help the progression of that family line in general. So every single child that is born to a family line represents the progressive step for that family. Of course, we don't usually see it this way. Most people see it backwards, So it's about really how we play those cards. And what's so tragic is that people are not really taking a conscious look at what cards are like, yeah, I got to change that one or figure out how to play that different. And they're not really taking those, suited cards, which are like king, queen, jacks, and going, haha, la, 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 la. I didn't have to work at this one like everyone else. Yay. So, it has the capacity to really rewrite your own personal story in just such profound and powerful ways. And I feel like everybody, especially people who are in this healing field and want self-development, they want more self-understanding. And I'm sorry, the picture of you started way before this physical life that you're currently living. And so to not want to know about the ancestral stuff that's going on with you is to not want to know about your childhood either. It's like, I don't care about my origins or what makes me me. You can't be curious about yourself and have that attitude, especially when this is the reality of what we're working with. And I'm telling you, the vast majority of the trauma that we're working through and dealing with is actually ancestral. And so it's the understanding of those things that I feel like really helps people break through it. When you're looking directly at something with your conscious mind, it just changes the whole dynamic around it,
How far back? So I've got a lot of questions about this now. In my left brain's like, all right, like 8 generations, 325, like Teal, how many generations do we have to go back?
All of as far as you can. Yeah. And it's all inside you. So you want to go back as far as you can go. But what you're going to notice on this path is that you're going to get these like pings for certain. It's usually what's active within you. It'll be like the universe kind of pulls you towards and activates, like, I need you to look at this. Now, maybe looking at this means, 3 generations ago, our family was in this place experiencing this thing. And guess what? It had a serious effect on all of us. And now the way that all of us are living and the way that we all adapted and the experience we're having. So when you get those pings, it's like a key to dive there. But it's no different going through that experience than it is being a detective, which is, I'm sorry to tell you right now, I know you can tell I'm getting excited because this is like one of my favorite things in the world. I could very easily be a genealogist because of this. It's almost like you become a detective to try to figure out all of this lost information that's just kind of sitting out there, not collected, so as to collect it. And so just like a detective gets like ooh, that's a ping, you're going to get that in this ancestral journey that each person can potentially take. The first step of which is research.
Okay.
And when it comes to genealogy, it's like the more research, the better. And there's so many different ways you can do research, from contacting historians to, walking down the path of genealogy to doing your genetic testing to talking to every single person you can possibly fathom talking to in your family. It's like, it's just the more information you have, the better.
I'm just having this moment. So it's really interesting. I'll just share this kind of vulnerably. I just adore you and I love what you're doing. And I thought about, I'd love to bring you back. I actually did a quantum healing timeline technique, soul retrieval with someone I didn't know this summer on an important date on the calendar. And I was there, I walk in I never met her, but I had a good feeling. I just knew. Walk in, she was amazing. Her whole house, you guys, with Teal Swan. Like literally teal. The shirt you're wearing was one of the like, I'm serious, it was one of the shower curtains. It was like I couldn't look anywhere without seeing your mug, your painting. I was in the joy room, so I think it was like the yellow. I mean, I use yellow and I just intuitively heard, oh, you need to reconnect with teal. And it's really interesting because that experience, it was a 3.5 hour, not that everyone's going to do it that way, but I will tell you what came through was mind glowing, as I like to say, because I don't think we really want our mind blown, but glow, it would just, and it's so interesting now. I've been kind of wondering because I trust this now. I trust this partly after our completion process week. I was like, I'm going to trust. I know what my intuition when it's a yes. I know it's higher guidance. And I was thinking, gosh, I'm excited to connect with you. I love the work you're doing, and I follow you, and I'm realizing, isn't that interesting? The whole experience that I had was around ancestral healing, and I didn't even put that together. I know this sounds ridiculous, but until like 4 seconds ago, before I started talking. And so I'm like, this is wacky. I thank you to the universe that like literally was saying, I think, Julie, bring in teal because this is important and we need to talk about this. Because so when you said patterns, I really like this idea. So we've got the patterns of what's not working, the patterns of what is working. So you do your research. What else for someone who's listening, who's like, shoot, I want to like live my best life and make an impact and change consciousness. I mean, we draw those people that are like, yeah, I want to add some goodness to this planet and like change some shit and like make it a healing place. Like, all right, tell us what we need to do next after the research.
Okay, so for anybody who really like wants to do a deep dive on this, I did create an e-course which walks people through like every step of the process of how to do it. But let's
Awesome.
do a quick overview.
Awesome. And we'll have the link to your course, Teal, also. I just want to tell everybody, I'll have that in the description for sure. But yeah, let's do the overview. So just in case they're like, no, I need to know now.
Okay. So the most important, I think, part of all ancestral healing is to identify patterns you want to change. So, I mean, it depends on, obviously, like every person's journey is different in terms of what their ancestors were doing and do and whatever. So I just can come up with an example right now. So let's say that you have a family pattern of somebody went through a war. Let's say you find out that in, I don't know, whatever year, some person went through a war and the way that they coped with that was denial. So you are somebody who is noticing when you're doing this research and interacting with the people in your family. It's a lot easier when you're interacting with mom, dad, grandma, right? Grandpa. You're noticing that there's this kind of family pattern maybe that you've adopted also of like almost toxic positivity where it's like, oh, every single time that something negative happens, I'm just going into denial about what's negative and just focusing on the positive. And you identify that that is something that also happened back in your ancestral line. So once you've recognized that, you really got to do that kind of consciousness work to be like, well, does this really serve us? Is this serving me? And is this serving the family line in general? Well, no, actually, because of the fact that I can see that when we go into denial, this, and this happens. Also, I'm watching this dynamic where every time a child in this family has a negative emotion, they're instantly invalidated, redirected towards the positive. And so all of a sudden, this is a person that can't have a relationship with their own negative emotions. Uh-oh, because there's a lot of very important information inherent in those emotions. Okay, so you've gotten to the point where you're like, I want to be done with this. So then you're going to make that your new thing. You're working on an ancestral pattern, but specifically by changing that one, changing the denial pattern. So that means you're working with how to address negative emotions. And that could look like, I'm sitting with negative emotions. That could look like writing a whole list on why negative emotion serves you. That could mean that you're developing a muscle for feeling. I mean, I could basically sit here and list a whole lot of things that you could do for that particular pattern. The point is that you've taken on that charge of being like, you know what? I'm the one that's going to turn this pattern around. I'm the one that's going to change that pattern for this family line. Obviously, part of that is changing the way you interact with the children, the progeny of the family line as well, right? Okay, so that would be the bulk of that. The other aspect of this would be that you're finding the patterns that are working within the family and embodying that. So let's say that you find out, we're pretty musical people in this family. Maybe I haven't picked up a musical instrument or anything like that, but I noticed that there's so much musical aptitude. Maybe I actually should do that. So for the sake of ancestral healing and ancestral ownership, I'm going to be a person who picks up an instrument. Now, maybe the instrument you pick up has something to do with your ancestry as well. I use this example because I actually know somebody who did this work with their ancestry, and they actually chose to pick up an ancient, super ancient instrument. They were already a musician. So they're like, wait a minute, the people in my family came from this area, and there's this one instrument people would have played. And now I basically have to go find somebody who knows how to play this instrument and teach me. And it became like this really fun exploration for them. And I'm telling you, when you're playing your ancestral music, it will do so much to your body. It's going to just blow your mind. So in that same vein, we've got the bulk of your ancestral healing is about that. We've got things like meditation and journey work. Like in the e-course, I basically have put forward one of those more esoteric processes that you can go through to connect with your ancestry. You've got embodying ancestral aptitudes, things like, let's say that you notice that in your family, everybody's really good at oration. So you're going to go ahead and really bring that out in a much more pronounced and conscious way. You've got, like we mentioned before, playing ancestral music. Very important when you find out where your family was from to find that type of music, especially at the time period when your family would have been there, and then you just play it in the house. But you got to watch for how it affects your body and it awakens your genetics. It's going to shock you. Like when you start playing your ancestral music, it's like your whole body just starts vibrating. Cooking and eating ancestral foods. That's another one of the things that really helps with integrating and therefore healing the ancestral pattern. If anybody has the capacity to go to the ancestral lands and specifically drink the water of the ancestral lands, it's like downloading the vibration of the place that was the origin of your people. And so again, it has this activating and resetting effect on the body and the being, which is quite incredible. Another thing, you can be clearing ancestral karmas. So let's say that you find out that in your family line, somebody exploited the forest beyond measure. Now, maybe that's your indication to go plant trees or donate money to reforestation efforts and essentially take that negative pattern that was running through the line and turn it in the opposite and more progressive direction. What else? God, I gotta remember. Rejection of the family. So obviously, if you're in this pattern where you're rejecting your family line, the rejection of the family line has to be changed in some way, because whenever you're pushing against the family line in that way, that huge current of energy that runs through the family line can't come into your body. So you're actually preventing yourself from all of that sort of, stream of energy, including all of those magical elements that are coming through the family line can't come through you. And you've essentially cut yourself off from it. I mean, this is something that's worth talking about relative to children, because I do know that especially when people have a parent that hurt them in some way, they think they're doing their own child a justice and doing something good for them by cutting themselves off from the family line. And I want people to understand that there's a very big difference between keeping a child safe from certain negative patterns in a family line and cutting a child off from their origin story, which they should feel very, very proud of, right? Now, we know that when it comes to discovering our ancestry, some of these things we're going to feel great about, and it's going to be like, that is so cool. Other stuff is going to be like, yeah. And it's important to be able to take in that entire picture. What else? God, I don't know. I wish I would have written my whole long list here before I came and sat down. Was that like an okay kind of ish overview type of thing? Because most people, when they hear ancestral trauma, what they're thinking in their head is that it's this very esoteric thing.
Right.
And what I'm wanting people to understand is that the esoteric aspect of this process is actually a very small piece of that pie, the smallest piece.
Yeah.
The vast majority of it you're doing in real time and very consciously with the recognition of these patterns and the ownership of these patterns.
I have a question, a two-part question with this that takes it a little bit into the intuitive realm. But the first is my understanding and my experience, even though It's really more the last 10, 15 years that I've really experienced what you're talking about, where I'm like, gosh, that's so interesting. I didn't realize my grandfather was into that. I never met him, but I feel him with me.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about what you can see and feel in terms of healing ourselves and the ancestral line, like line of ancestry, and then calling in ancestors, the understanding the
Oh, our ancestors are absolutely guides for us. And especially there are certain individuals, it's again, you're going to get the pings
yeah,
when you go down this road. It's like, oh, that person, I have a thing with that person.
yeah,
And so often when people have that feeling, that is an individual, an ancestral guide who has stepped in and is part of their spirit guide arsenal, right? It's not uncommon also for these beings to reincarnate into the same family. So it's super common for like a great grandfather or a grandfather to reincarnate as somebody's child in the same family line, because there's a lot of juice in personal expansion and the working of being on the other side of the coin and all these different dynamics with these same people, you know.
yeah, yeah. So I'm saying for those listening, I've always had this feeling like I'm going to ask people listening to just tap in, right, Teal? Like, have you felt a deep connection to certain people that have passed on? It's possible their soul is part of you.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
But
you're like, yeah, of course.
when it comes to ancestral trauma, I would like people to think about it like this. I want you to, like, where you're sitting right now, I want you to think about meeting your third, like, great granddaughter, just, or grandson, whichever. If you met them, now I want you to think about the pain you're going through in your life right now, whatever it is, because it'd be different for each one of us. How would you feel if you talked to your third great granddaughter or grandson and found out that they were literally living the opposite experience? They had found that healed experience, right? I think about this a lot, right? Because I come from a whole line of people that came on the Mayflower, 26 individuals on the Mayflower itself.
Hey, my friend. Okay, I'm just stopping really quickly because I want to share with you a really cool free tool that I have. It is my free Intuitive Superpowers quiz. My quiz is going to help you to harness and know and decipher your dominant intuitive superpower. It's really fun. It's quick. And once you take the quiz, you will get a video from me. You'll get tips and tools and practices to know how to harness and to really hone in on your intuitive superpower. There are 4 types. I don't want to give it away, but go to julieriesler.com/free quiz to take the quiz. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think? Did it resonate? And again, if you are here, I know like attracts like. This quiz will help you to really learn how to connect to your superpower, your intuition. Go to julieriesler.com/free quiz to take the quiz. And I can't wait to hear what you think and what you find out. Okay, back to the show. Lots of love. Wow. I didn't know that.
And it's interesting to think about this, the picture of trauma healing and trauma resolution across generations rather than just in an individual. And it's very, very obvious when you look at stories like that, where you've got a whole group of people who are willing to risk everything for what was not working for them somewhere, with the hopes of what would be on the other side. Now we know that that was this insane, horrible trip, basically, where people get over here and then it's not a great story, but they came over here thinking that they would have a better life. Now, so many of them had progeny who turned out to be presidents, progeny who turned out to be pop stars, progeny who made an absolute ridiculous success out of themselves in this brand new place. And how would they feel if they knew that? Would they feel a sense of completion? Now, I can put myself in their shoes and be like, absolutely yes. Like I would feel so healed myself if I knew that several generations ahead of me, progeny, were having the experience that I so wanted for myself and for the future. So we absolutely have it in our hands to provide this healing experience for our ancestors. And that includes healing that they didn't even know they needed, you know? It's not like everybody who died way back in the day was conscious of, oh, there's no intimacy in our family, and that's the reason I've been suffering, you know? But they will experience the resolution of that, even if they, you know, in life would have been the person who's like, I don't want intimacy, you know?
Right. So at the soul level,
Yeah.
there's healing that and this is what I think, at least it motivates me a lot, is I think about, I just know everyone that's tuning, I just know this amazing community. Seriously, we're people that we're changing things up. We're making it a better world, and we're going to do our work. We're going to do the healing work, and we're going to raise our consciousness. And I know that. So I'm like vibrating. I'm like, we're these people. And I know it motivates me, to think about when I do the hard things and I'm in the feeling I don't like, or I'm looking at these patterns. It tends to be more on my dad's side than my mom's. And it's uncomfortable as crap and my parents are alive, and I'm just using myself because we're here chatting, and I can hear like, oh gosh, this thing that's still with him. And I think of his family and I think of the trauma. I'm like, okay. But I think about, as I'm becoming, we can talk about self-love and grounded, and these things are changing and healing real time. I know it because I can see the reflection in the real, in the world, outer world. I do think about, wow, that's healing my dad's ancestry, my mom's ancestry, and it's changing the future for what's to come. And this is for all of us. So I'm sharing this. This is for all of us. And to me, Teal, this is where I think this work is so unbelievably important, especially right now. We talk about we want to change the world, but and I know it sounds trite, but I know you can see this and feel this. It does start with ourselves, and
yeah,
it really does. And maybe you can share more. Yeah.
And a big part of that too is owning the aspects of our ancestry that was working. Right now, we actually need a revival of a lot of the magic that's in our family lines to come back to the world. So, when we talk about ancestral healing, it's very easy to slip into this pattern of being like, we need to just change everything and not realize, wait a minute, some of what we need to do is to bring this ancestral medicine that we have to the world the way that it is today. These cultures that we come from have such incredible knowledge, such incredible gifts that we absolutely need to revive and keep alive.
What do you think some of that magic is, just to pull the thread a little bit?
Well, I mean, right now, all of us in our ancestry had tribe at some point. And some cultures, let's be honest, more than others, have this incredible capacity to form community and to establish, let's say, structures for community that really worked better than what's happening today. And we are in a time period where there's an epidemic of loneliness. So bringing forth that kind of ancient knowledge of tribe and communal support is something which needs to be revived in everyone, to be quite frank, right now. You've also got these ancient healing techniques from cultures that knew a lot more about sort of their intuitive connection with the plants and the animals and the minerals that are on this planet, just kind of sitting here available to us. And because we walked so far down the Newtonian road of physics and modern medicine, it's like we've lost a lot of these old practices, which are profoundly powerful, which need to be revived. I could sit here and probably think of a lot more.
I think those two, I think the epidemic of loneliness and reviving our ancient healing techniques, I think we got a lot in there. One of the things I would love to ask you about at an energetic and healing level, one of the biggest, from my own experience, what I have seen myself, clients, and the work I've done is and you talked earlier about autoimmune and our bodies, is truly the power of self-love. Not just, getting your nails done, bubble baths, those are great. We're not talking about that. And I can say, someone who likes that stuff, that's like 1,000th of it. But your experience, what self-love is and how it contributes to healing and to really shifting, the way that we view ourselves in the world.
There should be no differentiation between self-love and healing. It's one and the same, because when we're profoundly healing, what we're doing is we're taking ownership of ourselves so as to move ourselves in the direction of improvement, which is really healing. So basically, they're the same thing. That being said, healing is not always an enjoyable experience. And I think self-love is perhaps one of the most difficult practices there is, because the real meat and the heart of self-love is about reintegrating the aspects of yourself that you have pushed away. And that's why self-love can't really be understood outside of the context of the concept of fragmentation. Now, the concept of fragmentation is that your consciousness splits. And in the moment that your consciousness splits, you've got an aspect of you identify with and attach to, and an aspect that you suppress, deny, and disown. Usually that aspect is then suppressed into the subconscious mind. And that is profound self-rejection. And it makes it so that we can't actually act in our own best interests, because to act in our own best interest is to consider the aspect of ourselves that we have been pushing away. Now, self-hate, actually, most people think it's an extreme word, but self-hate is really resident in every one of us that has been socialized. Because when we come into a group experience where we are socialized, which everybody is, we get taught very, very early what is acceptable and unacceptable, what is good and bad, what is right and wrong. And it's very important for us when we're part of this society, especially being relationally dependent as we are, it's important for us to be what is good and right and acceptable, and then to shun what is bad and wrong and not acceptable. And to do that, we have to create these splits in our own consciousness where we essentially create an internal triangulation dynamic where we establish closeness with the social group by pushing aspects of ourselves away. That's the origin of self-hate. That's the origin of self-rejection. That's the opposite of self-love. So it is the reversal of that process, which is the real heart of self-love. And it is so hard. Like, what if I told you that self-love is about taking the part you hate the most about yourself and finding a way to see, hear, feel, understand, and pull it closer?
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you the truth. I've been working on this. It's not fun. And going back to the completion process, and this might be helpful for others, what's helped me with the fragmented parts is to actually characterize, like to find, if I can think or remember, it's usually not thinking, remembering, all right, me at 13 or me at 8 or me, like, and to picture myself and bring her in and just, become the loving parent with her and just let it rip, like let her, it's just thinking that this morning, actually, I was doing a little bit of this process and I'm like, if someone came in right now, it sounds like there's 3 of us. Like I am talking me, and then there's like the loving parent, and then there's this part of me that was so triggered. And this is, I want to ask you, but my sense is what we're seeing, without getting into all the issues in the world, or, we've got a election coming, we got a lot going on right now. To me, I'm always like, God, I feel like we're seeing a mirror of people's fragmented, unhealed selves is what
Absolutely.
Okay. It's what I feel like we're seeing.
Absolutely what is happening.
Yeah.
There is such a universal call for integration. And for there to be an integration, we have to first see how incredibly polarized our aspects are. And we're seeing that externalized. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on how we can fix that at the global level, Teal?
Yeah, we have to get curious. At a global level, we've got to get deeply, deeply curious. Because what you will notice about parts that are juxtaposed, that includes externalized, polarized people, is that they're responding to a fear that's on the shadow side of the other one. So it's usually that this party, for example, sees the shadows and the potential terror of that party, and vice versa. And it's not until you really understand the heart of that vulnerability that you can then caretake it. So what we're being asked to do when we're in these polarized perspectives and positions is to caretake the vulnerability of the other. And if we can do this for each other, we find that win-win scenario that we have thus far not been able to find. But of course, to do that, you can't have people that are operating in a state of narcissism anymore. And that's the real struggle right now, is that universally speaking, people are being tested. It's like, to what degree are you willing to be conscious? Because we are going to have to, as a race, it's no longer a luxury. As a race, we're going to have to wake up to the fact that we cannot stay this narcissistic in a system upon which we depend. We've got to actually start to take the best interests of others as a part of ourselves. And I use others very broadly, because that means others plants, others planet itself, others animals, others other people, others the thing that I consider my enemy. So it's like, no small undertaking, but it's only once we have that realization that we can't be this way anymore that we will actually be willing to step forward and stop playing the zero-sum game. And instead, like I said, caretake the vulnerability.
I'm wondering, at an energetic level, to me, also what I think you're saying is neutralize the polarity. So by bringing curiosity, maybe compassion, what comes to heart is sort of a,
Yeah,
I don't know. Yeah.
compassion, but not if it is superior. See, there's so many nuances.
Yeah.
So much of the time when I watch people who are approaching these types of things with compassion, they're doing so with like a superiority complex.
Mm,
Easy when we get into these discussions, especially when we're considering ourselves very like spiritually aware. It's
yeah.
very easy for us to slip into the ego of superiority and in the virtuosity of those character traits. And that is felt as a war. So I
Yeah.
mean, really genuinely curious. You should be wanting to know why people have the stance that they have, what it is that they're reacting to and responding to, especially what they're the most afraid of. And then you should be able to find some kind of a meeting of minds. You got to be able to accommodate for that
Yeah.
in whatever way.
Some of the work that I've done through the Heart Math Institute, which really goes into the heart, I've found what actually helps me. I don't know how this resonates for you, but like I picture dropping down from my eyes. You could use your third eye too, but I picture my eyes like through my heart, like getting curious from a just like at a deep heart to heart soul level, like what's going on here? What, and I think that's what you're saying is get curious, not from judgment, not just truly, I mean, curiosity, I don't know the quote, but I mean, it's to me, it's one of the most healing states we can be in.
It is, and curiosity is one of the easiest vibrations for us to slip into, including when we're in resistance, because
Yes.
where you can't go at something when you're in pain about something, you can't go at it with approval. You can't go at it in terms of, okay, let me figure out how to agree. But you can get curious. That's a very innately human trait to want to know more. Right. So it's
Yeah.
accessible for people, which is obviously we don't need to be stretching people vibrationally to such a degree that it's impractical for them to be able to do that. Curiosity is not impractical. It's accessible.
Brilliant. It's accessible. That's brilliant. I'd never heard it said that way. Yeah, that's I'm even thinking of the emotional scale. We've talked about that, and I think it's David Hawkins, The Power versus Force, where I mean there's just it's too far of a jump. But curiosity, it's really the bridge. Oh, we talked about that. Yes, that
And you
is
see how open people are to curiosity also. Curiosity is an opening vibration. So when we approach somebody with genuine curiosity, they want to open themselves.
yeah.
They want to explain themselves. They will give you more information. They're going to come out of resistance.
This is really important. So anyone listen, like whatever triggers you about the other party or side, I mean, it's so like Earth 3D to say this, but this is what we're in. This is what we're in right now. You know, sometimes I'm like, what are we doing? I don't know if it's a memory of something else, but I'm like, what is this? Like, why do we even have to be in polarity? Like, what is happening? However, I'm almost getting curiosity is the neutralizing. Do you think it's connected to the next fourth, fifth dimension curiosity?
I mean, I wouldn't necessarily go so far as to say that. I would just say that, like vibrationally
Yeah.
speaking, curiosity is the thing that unites opposing forces. So it's
Yeah. It unites us.
it's an opener, it's an integrator, it's a uniter.
Yeah. Love this. Lastly, you, first of all, thank you. This is so fun. And I was going to ask, for people that want to learn more about you, I call them heart flares, Teal, where like, you probably see them, but something either I didn't ask you or maybe a message you have, like, I don't know. Sometimes just if there's something comes through that could be a message that would be helpful, healing for our beautiful community, I'm just going to give you the floor to share whatever you'd like.
The other thing that I would definitely share right now is that right now it feels to almost everybody like they're in a pressure cooker. Like the heat is turned way up, and for a great many people, it's turned up to a degree where people don't know that they can handle it anymore. And I want to explain what is happening here. Obviously, the heat has been turned up on humanity to get to a certain place of awakening so as to not line up with certain negative outcomes, or the human race specifically, right? But all of us are in this position where we're hitting one of our most difficult gates. And it's the gates that I want people to understand right now. A gate is really any vibrational thing that is preventing your capacity to get to what you want. And there are on the path to what you're wanting so many of these gates, right? I'll give you an example of what the gates look like here. Let's say that you're an athlete and you're wanting very, very badly to win the gold medal. Potentially one of the gates that you run into is, oh, I can't get to that gold medal because I'm a person who can't ask for support. So we will have to move through and heal all of these dynamics that are involved in the I can't ask for what I want so that I can actually get support. Okay, let's say you get to that point, you move past that gate. Then the next reason you're not going to be able to get this gold medal that you want is another gate. Now, maybe potentially that gate would be something like, I have the tendency when it feels like there's too much ahead of me to give up rather than to continue. Okay, well, that pattern of giving up, once we move through that gate, we're able to be even closer to what we're wanting. But what most people don't understand is that so many of us right now are actually up against the very gate, which is having to choose the thing that we are the most afraid of and are wanting to run away from the very most in order to get what we want. So let's say that in your childhood, what you wanted more than anything was a sense of belonging. Your gate that you're most likely hitting right now is that you can't actually get that belonging unless you risk authenticity, which loses you belonging with the very group that you're with currently. So you basically have to choose to not belong in order to belong. And when we are at that gate, the choose the thing you've been avoiding your whole life to get what you want gate, it is one of the most painful experiences that a person can possibly go through. And so, I'm telling you right now, when I'm out of body looking at the way that human consciousness is right now, so many people are at this gate that it's like you're seeing the reflection on the outside in the world of just people not being able to deal with this. And then, flipping back and forth between trying to deal with it and just like coping with it. And then because of it, there's so much fear in the system that people in general are inflamed. So I would say that to recognize that you're most likely at that particular gate, to learn about gates in general, I just did a video on this. People want to watch that one. It's on my YouTube channel. It's called The Gates. And to also just recognize that when we're in a world like this that is inflamed because of fear, what you're interacting with primarily is protector parts. So usually when we're in a world where everybody's in a protector aspect, it's not a very fun world, right? And the answer to that most of us have is to go into our own protector parts. And by doing so, we actually inflame the whole situation worse. So what we're being called to do and charged with is to actually try to behave in a way that deactivates people's protector parts. To try to make ourselves safe for other people. And so if I had my wish, it would be that people would walk through the world in this time period. It's very difficult to do, but with this attitude of, I would like the people who are around me to feel safe with me. I would like the people around me to understand that I care. I would like to be the person where in an entire ocean of people who are not looking at each other in the eye and not talking and not smiling, I'm going to become the person who is going to smile at the person, I'm going to be the one who talks, and I'm going to be the antidote to the inflammation in the world today.
That is a drop the mic moment. I have nothing else I can say other than listen again to that, everyone, and again and again. And this is where each of us has something that we can do. We have lots that we can do, of course, in ourselves. Yeah. That is really brilliant. I love what you shared about out of body being able to actually see the inflammation. I don't see it. I sense it. I feel it.
Yep. I can see it in your body. Your body's reacting to it. So
yeah. No, I'm like, and this feels very like plumb line true. And we all can all be that antidote. That's really beautifully said, Teal. I believe in that. I thank you. Thank you for sharing something that's there's so much here. And I just, all right, I have one last question. I can't help myself. We'll have to do this again and again. I always have questions for you. With all that's happening and what you're seeing, knowing that I believe anyone that's tuning in really wants to have positive change, is there there's so many different tools and things. If we had to choose one thing that we're doing each day to really make an impact that's going to help shift consciousness, is there one thing you would recommend doing?
Become sensitive.
Mm.
Um, I know that that's like a one-liner, but now let me explain. We have hardened ourselves to the world. We've hardened ourselves to vulnerabilities, and we have made it so that we are a culture as a human whole that is not in touch with emotions. And this is profoundly dangerous. And I understand that what I am saying is a very big ask because this world is very, very painful right now. But we're not going to be able to get out of the pain that is happening in this world right now unless a great many of us tip the scale here by becoming very much resensitized to our emotions, very much willing to drop into them and feel the intuitive messages that are inherent within them, and get very, very sensitive to things. Stop normalizing them, stop desensitizing, so that we can actually tell what is and is not conducive to human health. And it's only when we are able to do that that we will then make the changes necessary for us to have a society and a world that is conducive to us, which is really what all of us are wanting. So it's like the very most painful thing to do right now, which is to open up, become sensitive and soft and a feeler, is the hardest to do in a world where it's not conducive to that, right? But it does make sense, right? I'm telling you, the new earth is going to be brought in by the people who are sensitive. Absolutely the case.
Well, we've got a ton right here. I can tell you right now, if like attracts like, we got a lot of sensitive folks watching and that want to become more sensitive. Yeah, I even heard our intuition. I just pictured it like droplets, like in each emotion, the more we're sensitive and feeling, the more we're in tune. I just keep seeing these droplets of like intuitive guidance or like in the emotions, they come through them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Ooh, that's
There's a
awesome.
wealth of information in every emotion. So
Yeah.
the more that we are not in tune with those, the more cut off we are to this wealth of information.
You are such a sage, medicine woman, intuitive healer, guide, and in my world, a friend and someone I'm so grateful for you, Teal. This conversation just I feel lit up, and I just thank you for being here and sharing your wisdom, your beautiful. You've just got this sage like knowing, and like no one else I've met, and it's really a gift to share you.
Thank you so much.
And I'll just say to everyone, to our beloved soul family, we love you. I'm speaking on behalf of you, Teal, but I'll just say we love you from our heart to yours. And to remind you, as Teal said, honoring your sensitivity. I know it's hard going in the feelings that you don't want to feel, knowing in that is where your intuitive guidance and your strength is going to come. And please share this episode with anybody that this could help. Anyone that's suffering, anyone that's feeling alone, please share this episode and keep coming back to it. I know I will. And just thank you, love you. Here's to you really honoring your highest self. Love and light always. Mwah.